Julie Wayua Matheka is a human rights advocate. She is among our day one guests.
Yes, she's among our week one fixers.
Yes.
So she's. We didn't know we were celebrating an anniversary today with her because she was there in week one.
On the first Thursday of Fixing the Nation, and she's coming back again on the first Thursday of Fixing the Nation 1 year later.
Was it Wednesday or Thursday?
I'm not sure, but it was Wednesday or Thursday.
It's one of those two. I think it was a Thursday.
Yes.
Karibu sana.
I can see the table is becoming a bit old, but the conversations are good.
As should happen to tables.
Exactly.
To show they're being used.
Yeah. So let me start by congratulating you three for a year of fantastic conversation. I'm really glad that I'm back. I think the first time I was here, I talked about rights of an arrested person, and it elicited quite a bit of debate. And it's a nice segue now to talk about petty offenses because I think it's equally important and they're kind of linked together. So thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming, and of course, thank you for being a day one fixer. We always it's incredibly nice when people put faith in something that's just starting. You're like, "Takam, tunongejia." Yeah. So thank you as well, Julie.
Yeah.
Let's start with listening to the quote of the day. Jana will share as always. Let us know if it speaks to you or not.
Or not. Booker T. Washington, who was an American educator and author and leader in the African American community very many years ago, once said, "You can't hold a man down without staying down with him."
Wow. That is very interesting because it relates, of course, with a lot of us. You can't hold someone down unless you stay down with them. So if you allow someone to soar, then they fly with you. Meaning, ideally, from where I sit, it's you empower people, you get blessings in return. You hold people down, unfortunately, you hold yourself back. So allow people to thrive.
Yeah.
Push them in opportunities to thrive. So, relates completely.
That's amazing.
In the pursuit of justice, we often want to look at justice for the rich and justice for the poor, justice for the big man and justice for the small man. Every time we talk about, for example, how cases are handled in court, people say, you steal a chicken, you're jailed immediately. You steal the entirety of Kenya's chickens, you will never be jailed. And we ask, why? Why? This is where petty offenses come in, right, Julie?
Okay.
But what are petty offenses? Like, if we just start from that thing, because every time we talk about petty offenses, how petty is petty?
Actually, that's a good question because there's often the slight confusion around petty offenses and minor offenses. And some offenses are actually considered in the eyes of the Kenyans as petty, but they're actually not. So, for example, stealing of a chicken, whereas is considered a small item to certain people, a chicken is someone's livelihood. So it's considered theft or stealing. So that is not a petty offense. A petty offense, per definition of the Africa Commission on Human and People's Rights Principles on the Decriminalization of Petty Offenses, which is a long title for a guideline which I'll call the Principles, is an offense that carries a small fine, a warning or a caution, and ideally, if incarcerated or held in detention, would carry a maximum term of 6 months. So this is by definition an offense that would carry either a 6-month term or a small fine.
What is small?
Now, small is where the relativity comes in because small to you might not be small to someone else. So ideally, most fines go between 100 and 5,000. But we have also seen that is a big issue because a lot of people can't actually afford the 5,000 fine. So you'll find that for certain offenses, when they come as petty offenses, someone will easily give out 5,000, but there'll be an appeal from the person who is behind the dock saying that I actually cannot afford 5,000. And that sometimes perpetuates the injustice because that person is then remanded because you see, the idea is you either pay the fine or you go into custodial sentence. So certain people cannot afford that 5,000. As such, they go into custodial sentences. And that is something that we have been advocating against because you find that this person is going into remand for 5 days, 1 week, 10 days because they couldn't afford that fine. And that actually brings out the bigger issue of poverty. So that makes that person more vulnerable in the criminal justice system because the only reason that they are being detained is because of their lack of resources to pay what is considered a small fine.
I'm thinking through some of the offenses that are petty offenses now. Stealing a chicken is theft, sawa. But what's petty offenses? I started with loitering. That's the one that came to mind.
Yes.
Is loitering a petty offense?
Loitering is a petty offense. It's actually one of the offenses that we still believe should not be an offense because ideally, what is loitering?
What is loitering?
What is
Yeah.
loitering?
Because every person has the right of liberty, free movement. Why is it that certain people will be considered loiterers, whereas other people will be considered window shopping?
Right? Or you're
Moving about
taking
their business.
unazurura versus you're taking a walk.
Tanga.
Yeah.
Exactly. So it has an underlying
Our
discrimination.
director
to it.
Jackson just said, unangoja traffic ish.
So it has a lot of
Yeah.
interesting dynamics. So certain people, because of how they present and how they're profiled in society, will be considered loiterers, as opposed to others who would be considered going about their business, just
Or walkers, joggers.
So it's one of those things that we have been pushing for decriminalization because it's actually really against the Constitution. I mean, everyone has the right to liberty, everyone has the right to freedom of movement. So that's one of the provisions of the penal code that we have actually been advocating against. But you asked the question around what are the other offenses that are considered petty offenses. There's one called common nuisance.
Common nuisance.
Yes,
What is
common
being
nuisance.
a common nuisance?
It depends on who is the person who is deeming you a nuisance. Certain people who preach on the streets could be considered nuisance. Others who are shouting about particular issues could be considered a nuisance. Those people
in the
Those people. The lovely gentleman who walks around after a couple of ujis at night, screaming to the top of their voice, that could be considered a nuisance. So it depends on the person who is enforcing the law at the time. And we also see that creates an arbitrariness in how it's enforced because it's subjective. What is to say I'm not having a conversation with someone on an earpiece that is very animated? And what differentiates you from that other person? So,
And even if I'm having a conversation with myself, what's the crime there?
what is the crime? So we see that there are a lot of offenses that are still rooted within our penal code, within various statutes that are very arbitrary in their nature, subjective in their application, and actually cause great harm to people. So common nuisance, idle and disorderly, begging.
What?
Yes, there's a crime of begging for alms. There's something called being a vagabond, which I have never really
We've
understood.
talked about that before.
Which I've really never understood, and I'm really hoping someone can explain this vagabond state, because everyone has a low point and a high point. So really, what is being a vagabond? So there are certain things that really still stay within our criminal justice system that are wrong. And then in the Africa context, because this is not only a Kenyan issue, petty offenses cut across. There are certain countries which still criminalize disobedience of parents. Yes. There's another offense of failure to pay debt. Another offense called, or rather an offense that is created through bylaw like urination in public. And we see that some of these offenses could actually be really solved by social economic solutions and programs. For example, creating free access to sanitary spaces and creating public toilets that really don't have any amount that you just enter and you use, because we appreciate that for 10 shillings, that could be pocket change for someone. But 10 shillings, considering a whole day's affair, someone might actually need to use that facility more, and they might not have that money. So there are various amount of petty offenses, and unfortunately what we see is a lot of counties create a lot of offenses. So even the whole thing around littering, crossing on certain parks, moving around in certain places at certain times, there are various things that various counties create. So the list is exhaustive. And I think that has been another challenge that we have had, that whereas we can address at the national level what are petty offenses and charge Parliament with the mandate to decriminalize petty offenses, we see that unless we go into the counties and have direct conversations with county assemblies, they will continue creating these laws, because at the end of the day, some of these laws create revenue. I mean, people violating these laws create revenue for the counties. So they see this as as a money-making way.
Julie,
Yes.
public order is a principle, and a good principle, right? We even have a Public Order Act. So I can see the genesis of some of these petty offenses were in that colonial time when they did not want these Mzungus, and the Mzungus did not want the natives to loiter around Nairobi, Kamauna, Kipande, and so on and so forth. But let's bring it to current day and age, right? Order and disorderliness are still things that we encounter. So in terms of public order, we have noise pollution, which is created by, through public nuisance of somebody just standing somewhere and just working an acre speaker up and preach ko bus stop, right? How do we control such things? So even if we don't decriminalize it, but how do we then bring it into the aspect of public order?
Okay.
Yes, there is the issue of...
I want to go to Jivanji and sleep, not have someone preach in my ear.
So this is a public park that we have created, and we want to make sure that it is conducive for every user, and so not favoring some users and disadvantaging others, right? Let's even say we put up public toilets, as many as possible, clean, free, and somebody still chooses to go behind that toilet,
And
right?
urinate,
And urinate behind the toilet, right? Should we say that, it's no longer in the penal code?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, so what do? We are decriminalizing them, but what are we doing about public order?
Well, I think everything goes back into, we are a community of people. There are systems and there's order, and we need to ensure that we are not operating in a manner that fits you and you alone, and you're not thinking about your neighbor and the country at large. So we're not saying that certain things need to be tolerated and certain things need to be okayed by the very nature. Of course, urinating and defecating in public spaces is also a health concern at the end of the day, right? So we need those spaces where people can do those things in a safe and hygienic manner. But we also need, yes, the law to regulate certain things, because indeed certain people could just be errant and decide to just flout the law. But what we are saying is, have we created structures and systems that accommodate people to be able to use those facilities, and as such then do not do what they do? Have we created parks and safe spaces for people to then relax and chill? But also, have we created specific timings, for example, for people to play their music? I mean, there are ways in which all of you can enjoy your right to liberty and your right to the enjoyment of the environment that you're in without necessarily infringing on the other person's rights. So that's what we're actually arguing for, that one person's rights does not supersede another person's rights. However, we need to be accommodating of the fact that we are all different and our way of enjoying our own rights is different. However, we should not infringe on a person's rights in so doing.
But does it answer Eric's question? I'm the one who hasn't gotten the answer, which is
So
then
for public disorder.
once we decriminalize, then...
So the conversation on decriminalization goes hand in hand with another conversation of reclassification. So whereas some of these things can be removed from law and gotten away with in totality, there are certain things that can be reclassified to lower the penalties. But there are other things that ideally should be introduced to move in tandem with the laws. Because you cannot police everything. That's another thing. As a society, we live by the laws and we breathe by the laws, but there are certain things that we need to do to ensure that everyone is in harmony with each other. So it's not that we are saying it's going to be a free-for-all, everyone do what they want to do. We are saying that we have appreciated that there is an arbitrariness in the law, that there is an application that disfavors the poor and the vulnerable, and the policies that we then introduce, including safe spaces, parks, recreation, activities, should be in a way that is complementary to all aspects of all people.
And that if that is disobeyed, then now you can be like, we need to deal with this person. From the conversations you've had with communities, do you think they'd feel safer if these offenses were decriminalized? And I know that's a strange question. So generally, do they feel, actually, no, criminalize them because I feel safe if I don't have vagabonds or people loitering? Or is the general consensus, we don't feel safe because we are targets? Like which spectrum does it lie mostly?
Because I've had diverse conversations with multiple stakeholders, I think I'll segment it into different categories. So when you talk about the persons who are otherwise affected by the existence of the petty offenses, of course they would want them decriminalized. If you speak to hawkers, they will tell you that the reason as to why they exist is because there's a demand for their wares. If you think about it, many people who are driving really do not have opportunity, and maybe I may be wrong, to go into the downtowns and to look for that thing that is the hawker selling. They will actually pick it from there and then purchase it, put it in their car and move on. But those things are being sold somewhere. And there's someone who's supplying this hawker with those things to sell, and then they get their cut, and that person makes their money. So there is a demand. There's actually an ecosystem around it. So if you target the hawker, they will then say that these laws disfavor us because we are meeting a demand by the people. But then at the same time, if you then again look at the customer, look at the people, there are certain people who will then say that we don't have walkways because all the hawkers have occupied all the walkways. So why can't they be taken to a particular street or a particular section whereby people can go there? Again, two different lenses. Certain people will say they will not go to where now the hawkers have been moved to because it's inaccessible to them. So it depends on who you talk to in regards to whether or not they're comfortable with the decriminalization of petty offenses or not. But I think the bigger concern for us who are working in the space is that we have often seen that people are targeted arbitrarily by law enforcement entities, depending on various issues. It could be that a prominent person is coming into the community or into the space, and therefore they need all the streets
to be cleared.
There was actually a court case in South Africa whereby they actually challenged the sweeping exercises that were being conducted because they were being done in such a forceful manner where people were being removed from the streets, put in vans, their wares are not being properly taken care of. So you'll find that even by the time the person is released, they don't know where their things went. Some people, as you have seen, hawk with their children. So there's also separation of families. So there are a lot of issues that actually happen in that public order management period that are actually contrary to human rights.
Think about even the basics of a running battle. If you've been in town or Ngara or anywhere, when Kanju come,
it's chaos.
It's absolute chaos. It's even from a safety perspective. Think about it also from a security perspective, because people will take advantage to steal from the hawkers, to also steal from people caught up in just this, there's people running, rushing everywhere. So it's absolute chaos. But I wanted to get to just go a bit further back and look at the burden of these petty offenses on the prison and remand system. Eric had talked about it as well earlier. What does that look like for our prisons and our remand?
Okay. Authoritatively, I think I want to just pivot into a 2017 audit that was done by the National Council on Administration of Justice. And in that audit, it stated that, first of all, 70% of the persons who are within the criminal justice system are petty offenders. 70, which is a stark number. Like, imagine the number of cases that are within the criminal justice system, and then 70% are petty offenses. So persons without licenses, nuisance, drunk and disorderly, idle and disorderly, creating a disturbance, the gamut. So that is a big number. And then you look at the overpopulation in the prison system. Our prison system has the capacity of around 30,000. That is at full capacity. More often than not, it's at 60,000.
Whoa.
Which is, I guess, 100% plus another 100%. So it's overcrowded by people who are serving short-term sentences, because the thing about petty offenders is that you will be there because you cannot afford the fine. So you might get 3 days, 5 days, 7 days. So you enter the system has to provide for you, and the data that shows is that we take care of a prison inmate with around 250 shillings per day. So you're looking at 250, let's use times 10, assuming, because easy math. So assuming someone is there for 10 days, that is 2,500 of the taxpayer money going into taking care of a petty offender. But then you're looking as well as this person does not get any rehabilitation per se in 10 days. I mean, to rehabilitate someone, to reform and to come into the society, you need a bit of time. So these people are overcrowding the prison system. They are not getting any rehabilitative element. They are actually indoctrinated into hardcore crime because, again, when you're in a remand facility or you are in a detention facility, there is no safeguard around who you will interact with. So it also becomes an opportunity for radicalization and actually an entry point into hardcore criminal activity. But at the same time, it's dehumanizing. And I think that's the thing that many people often forget. Even a day in a detention facility can completely change your outlook on the system, of the world, and of the very society you live in, because you realize that your deprivation of liberty stays with you for such a long time and exposes you to such grave harm. So these people are often there because, one, they did not afford legal representation. Because think about it, if you are caught for a petty offense, where will you likely get an advocate who will take up a matter where the substrum is maybe 5,000 shillings? And then if you plead not guilty in certain cases, it takes longer. So what we also saw from a bit of research that was conducted was that a lot of people actually end up bribing their way out of the criminal justice system in totality to avoid the lengthy nature of the criminal justice system. So it also becomes a conduit for corruption. We have also, I mean, everyone has experienced it, and I don't want to put anyone on the spot, whereby you get arrested for maybe even dropping a piece of litter, which I don't advocate for, so please don't litter the city. And what is your first thought process? Pole sana mkubwa, tuongee kachai. Like, you try and get a way out of it instead of actually trying to face the law. Why? It's ingrained in us that the criminal justice system would take longer, it's dehumanizing, it's stressful, it's a lengthy process. You don't want to go through all that. Bribe your way out faster, which is wrong. So it creates an entire ecosystem. But then at the same time, we have also, and I want to laud the Chief Justice of the Republic of Kenya for her recent pronouncement that there will be virtual courts in Kibra and certain places. I think it's a pilot program, because we have also seen that if you don't end up bribing your way out on a Friday night, what happens?
You're there for the weekend.
You're there for the weekend. So people have actually found ways to get out of those detention facilities. So there are a lot of instances where we can say it affects the detention facilities, it affects the prisons, it affects the police detention facilities, because if you are arrested on a Friday night, the detention facility, which is the police station, is often overcrowded. So it strains the entire it strains the entire system.
You said this conversation of decriminalizing these petty offenses is going hand in hand with recategorization.
Reclassification.
Reclassification. So reclassify loitering.
So some of them will not be up for reclassification. I'm a proponent of certain things being completely decriminalized. So idle and disorderly should be decriminalized because of its unconstitutionality. Creating a disturbance, decriminalized because of its unconstitutionality. But there's certain laws, I think mostly the ones on health and safety, particularly creating foul smells, that will actually be reclassified.
I'm sorry.
Yes, creating. So you see, there are two dimensions to creating foul smells. We could consider that, which is a normal human bodily function, as something that should be decriminalized.
Yeah.
But then there's someone who could potentially create something that pollutes the environment, which should be reclassified so as to bring either down the penalty or heighten it, depending on that need. So there are certain offenses that will be either brought up or down because they are actually creating a bigger conversation around the fact that we actually hadn't looked at the potential damage to the entire society. Yeah.
And so where do we place them?
So we place them in the reclassification category. So what happened, what we have done is there's a committee that has been working on this, whereby we have submitted certain laws for decriminalization, itemized the laws for decriminalization, and then suggested particular laws for reclassification, either bringing down the fine or also bringing down the prison terms. There are certain things that actually carry a prison term of a year plus that we think should be brought down to 6 months or even less because of the way they've been structured in the law. So those are the ones that we are pushing for to be reclassified. But I think the thing is, people need to remember that, as you rightly pointed out, Eric, there are certain laws that we inherited from our colonial masters. Africa and the Caribbean were mostly colonized by the Brits, and with that they imposed certain laws that were actually to oppress the people who they had colonized. And if we are talking about reclaiming our authority and our autonomy as Africans, as people, as Kenyans, we really need to look at these laws as whether they still serve the society with which we live in today. And that's the conversation you've been driving, that we need to look at our laws. Are they oppressive? Do they subjugate other people? Do they perpetuate discrimination? Do they actually limit the freedoms under the Bill of Rights? So that is the lens we are approaching this conversation with. And as I pointed out, unfortunately, the penal code is not even exhaustive. We need to go into the arena with legislators. We need to talk to them, because laws are created daily and petty offenses are created daily. There was a proposed nuisance bill. I'm not sure if it became an act of Nairobi, whereby they were saying that there's a designated area for persons to do their hawking and their wares and selling their wares, and violation of that would attract a fine of 50,000. We wrote a memoranda and challenged that, because 50,000, this person might be hawking wares with a quantity of less than 10,000, where would they get 50,000 for? Because that means that by default, this person would then end up serving a custodial sentence. So we need to also engage with parliamentarians and persons who sit in various houses. When I say parliamentarians, then parliament, and then now we go into the counties, around what exactly are you producing from your various houses in terms of legislation and the impact that it will have on the people. And also because law is not the end. I believe in a system where we do not over-legislate. Are there ways in which you can achieve public order and management without the law by creating and inculcating the values of the Constitution and community in that realm? Because again, we cannot police. It's the same thing as policing your family. You don't have laws to police how your family runs, but you instill values and discipline.
And then you pray for the best.
I get the sense of what you're saying, and I support looking at these laws and the impact that it has on communities, individual persons, but also on the society. Maybe one way of looking at it is also putting the responsibility on the duty bearer, which is government, in whatever case. For example, this particular one that you've given as an example, this is a designated hawking area, which is basically,
So it's a market.
It's an open retail, daily, whatever market, right? Whatever we call that market. Because it's already designated, it says that if you'd like to practice this trade, come here, we've provided a space. Now, if you opt not to come here because we've provided a space, then you're committing an offense. On the face of it, that makes sense because you're saying, I have provided, then it's here. Now, maybe it's adding the issue of, are they enough?
Exactly.
Places. I have provided, I have designated places within each sub-county, within each ward, within each this and the other. And if you have 77 hawking markets in the city, then it increases the argument. So Mariam, why are you not hawking in that market? Why are you at the roundabout? Okay? So there's that side. But then there's also that other side of, if you completely don't say, if you don't come to the market, there is no penalty, then you've basically opened it up. And we can't say that, now we created a market, please, people, please come to the market. Please, Janet, don't buy anything on the road. Please drive towards the market. Please walk to the market. We've created a walking space. How do we make people do it?
Eric, but you saw this in Homa Bay, best example of that fish market.
Yes.
How many people did you see hawking fish on the side of the street?
In Homa Bay?
Yes.
During that day?
Yes.
Yeah. Not many.
Yeah.
But also,
there's a fish market.
How many people are outside of that market?
There was a few.
Yes.
True.
See?
But outside of the market is better than on the road. Anyway, okay.
You see, this is, and remember, this is during a week that these things were happening. I am not sure we can talk about if you went to Homa Bay today, and you want to find, samaki wa kukaranga, that you would not find it on the streets. That market, it operates early in the morning. It closes at some point. I mean, at some point, business is over. To Mamaliza samaki. The ones who bought the fish from here, they went to start selling the fish elsewhere. Have we provided a place where, kama unataka kula samaki kutoka kwa nini, kwa moto, where you can eat, and so on. Basically, what I'm saying is, it makes sense to put these laws in some case, but how do we make sure that these laws are there also not to punish?
Yes.
But at the same time, that the law starts with front-loading the responsibility of the government to provide services.
Yeah. And that's the whole argument, because moving from even the conversation of hawkers, I had talked about the conversation around people doing their bodily function in open spaces, create the services. And I think there's an important aspect to this. Are you engaging the right stakeholders when you're creating the markets? Are you engaging with the right people? Because these solutions are often created when you have that dialogue as the government who has the duty, but also as the people who are engaging in that form of trade. Where would they prefer? Why are they preferring certain places? Because of the market and demand. And how do you make it functional? Because again, if you're moving a hawker from the front streets, into the back end, what is the question? I mean, what is the issue there? They will say that in the back streets, the client is not there. They're not coming to the back streets. That's why they want to come to the front streets. How do you ensure a balance whereby you are saying that, indeed, we appreciate that the front streets is where there's a demand, but we cannot also have everyone on the front. Let's move you to the back and then create alleyways and make the alleyways safe for people to go into the back streets, because the another issue is the safety. So those are now the people who need to be engaged in terms of the right stakeholders to create the right system that works for all parties so that you ensure that business continues.
Okay. Can I take a small tangent on, as we decriminalize some things, can we criminalize others?
For example?
Arbitrary, like non-existent offenses that are used basically as a tool for exploiting, especially young people. I don't think there's an offense kama kutembea bila ID. You know, no such thing exists. You can correct. Is walking without an ID an offense?
Not necessarily an offense. The idea is that if you're asked to show your identification, by you not having it at the time, it's not an offense, but you should be given reasonable accommodation to either get it. It's the same thing as a DL.
Exactly.
If you don't have it on you at the time, you can actually say that, indeed, I don't have it. I can log into my NTSA app and show my the fact that I'm compliant,
Yes.
and then now produce it at an appropriate time. I think there's
let me give you that. Several other examples. There's a time around the CBD, a lot of them will actually be centered around the CBD, you'll see why. Wearing camouflage, for example, was used to exploit a lot of young
Yes,
people.
I remember that.
It's like, oh, for some reason, you are, imitating the military. Good.
Section 185 of the Penal Code. Wearing uniforms declared to be for or exclusive use.
That is not a uniform. Wearing a jacket that has a camouflage pattern is not wearing military uniform. Like, you see, exploit that. Taking pictures in the CBD, again, like all of these things are just used as a way to basically harass young people under the guise of a petty offense. And because a lot of people are not aware that these are not offenses, or even if you are aware, you just don't want to go mano a mano with Kanjo or a police officer, so you just give out something small. I want to criminalize that. Yeah.
Well, they're already criminalized. That's the problem. Because, and that's actually the law that they use now to engage with you, because they're actually against the law that you should not be wearing camouflage and wearing uniform that is depicting of a particular military outfit.
Yep.
I don't know the exact wording of it, but it's basically don't wear clothes that depict you as a member of the military. There is some thought behind it, and I understand it, because if you happen, unfortunately, to encounter a criminal organization that is wearing military combat, you might say that I was attacked by KDF or police. And it makes a situation slightly harder in terms of who actually attacked you. But there is also the converse, which is that fashion has evolved and combat clothing is fashionable. So how do you also ensure that you comply with another existing order which exists, which is that military personnel and police officers should at all times be in their uniform with a badge? Because a Kenyan will not get a badge. A Kenyan will not be able to...
A civilian.
A civilian. Let me use civilian. A civilian.
And they will not be wearing a
Julie,
uniform either.
A civilian could create what looks like a badge. See, here's the thing about such kind of laws, right? Yeah, because if this is, and here the law says that the minister, who's maybe at this point in charge of Interior, may, by notice in the Gazette, upon the application of any person who perform or who are members of any organization which performs any service, which in his opinion is in public interest, declare that any uniform badge, button, or other distinctive mark used by those persons and described in the notice shall be for exclusive use of those persons. So mnaweza sema sisi ni dini ya fulani fulani fulani, mnaweza vaa hii uniform na mpewe ruhusa. Right? And then there is what is designated and gazetted as this is the official police uniform, which has whatever pants, shirt, sweater, jacket, reflective jacket, badge, and then all the insignia, plus the emblem of the police service, and so on and so forth. Now, if you found somebody today, Mariam, amevaa shati ya pink na trouser blue kama mimi vile nimevaa leo na viatu za brown, lakini nimevaa kofia ya polisi, crown,
beret
like
or a
crown.
I would not think you are any member of any. Yeah, I think this is again how you use the law.
So
Because here's the thing:
let's remove
you
the
find me in
kofia.
town wearing a camouflage crop top and shorts. Oh wow, KDF are in the streets. Like, we need to engage our heads. These guys use it as a way of just exploiting people.
Yeah.
Because there is reasonable impersonation, which is I am in uniform, quote unquote, head to toe. And then you can ask me a question: why are you impersonating a member of the police service or the military, etc.? But wearing a jacket that has a camouflage pattern, a top, a pant, a shoe.
Yeah, they can't tell the difference. Becky Blessings, I'll let you answer that. My brother was arrested on Saturday at 10 p.m. by plainclothes police officers and was not informed of the reasons for his arrest. Released on Sunday evening after paying 2K. So much oppression. It happens a lot. I think this is why. As you answer that question, I also wanted to ask best practices that you've seen in countries that had this issue and decriminalized, and what that has done for society, what that has done for the justice system, so that it's like a motivating factor for what we're discussing here. But first to Eric and Mariam's.
I think
the debate.
I think the thing is, and it's very unfortunate that we actually even have to go to the various lenses with which things are looked at. There's a time that a lot of politicians were donning camouflage combat clothing. Was any of them arrested?
Nope.
So I'll just leave that pending.
Should
as
they
it
have
is.
been arrested?
If the law is going to be applied, it should be applied uniformly.
Yep.
So you see, those are the conversations. When a young poor person or a young person from a community that has already been profiled in a certain way does the same thing as certain people, the law is applied differently. And that is what we have been pushing against, that there is no uniformity in the application of certain petty offenses because they are very targeted to certain communities and certain people and certain persons of status. Let me leave that pending. Now into the conversation of Becky?
Yes, Becky, yes.
It is unfortunately what still happens, whereby people are booked on weekends and they are unfortunately left to stay within the detention facility. And once something is given, they're released. The question would be, were they given cash bail or did they give a bribe? Because those are two different issues. For cash bail, ideally, they would have to appear before court on Monday. So did that process take place? And if not, then that was a bribe. And that means that person was exploited and taken advantage of at the police station. And that is what we are pushing against, because these are the things that are rarely documented, because you don't have really a track into how this person then was engaged with, because the court will not have a record of this person, the prosecutor will not have a record of this person. This issue will then stay isolated within the police cells. And a lot of Kenyans have faced exactly what Becky's brother has faced, which is why we have been pushing really strongly against the continued existence of petty offenses. And now coming into best practices of what other countries have done. For Malawi, there was a case, the Mayeso Gwanda case, a hawker who had been arrested, held without being held in police detention and was produced 3 days later. The crime was hawking. Was produced 3 days later, was given a fine, but decided to plead not guilty because the charge was being a vagabond. He pleaded not guilty and decided to see the process through and decided to form and file a constitutional petition challenging the fact that he had a right of liberty, he had a right to engage and free movement, he had a right to engage in the activity that he was engaging in, and he had a right to be treated without discrimination because of the kind of activity he was doing. So the Malawi case actually was quite prominent, and it actually led to the unconstitutionality of the offense of vagabond being declared. Wow. They are in their process of actually now looking at all the offenses within their republic and then hopefully decriminalizing some. But that was a win. A bigger win we have had is at the African Court on Human and People's Rights, the Pan-African Lawyers Union challenged the compatibility with vagrancy laws with countries that have signed onto the African Charter on Human and People's Rights. So basically saying that we are all, the countries that have signed onto the African Charter have ascribed to non-discrimination, freedom of movement of people, freedom of association, and other rights that are there. Does the existence of these laws actually conflict with our commitment under the African Charter? And the African Court actually ruled indeed there is an incompatibility there. and as such recommended that African states should go into a process of looking into their laws with a view to decriminalize and reclassify petty offenses and offenses that actually are vagrancy related. So there is some win in the whole conversation around petty offenses, but I think what we have seen as a win is the targeted litigation around certain offenses. I do believe there's a case on creating a disturbance. There's actually a court order barring the continued use of creating a disturbance. I think it was the Morara Kebaso case.
Right.
So there's that. Courts have actually been talking about the question of idle and disorderly, whether that is incompatible with our country, whether it's incompatible with our aspiration of Bill of Rights. So there is a movement around petty offenses and countries coming out with progressive legislation, progressive judgments, and we are hoping that this continues. I know there's another by Sierra Leone at the ECOWAS court, so they're there.
Okay. Moving.
I think the only challenge is the whack-a-mole problem I said, where you decriminalize one, another sprouts. So how do we also have a conversation with the people who create the laws so that we are not fighting against each other, we are actually understanding the vision of what we want to create, which is a society that looks at everyone through the prism of dignity, equality, and acceptance.
Get into the lawmakers. Can we go into the justice system a little bit as well? Finding allies all along the justice system, whether it's with police officers, with the judiciary, with public attorneys and things like that. How do we make them allies in this idea of not just decriminalizing, but also, thinking of people in the justice system as, human beings worthy of dignity as opposed to petty offenders?
There is a very huge constituency of magistrates and judges who are actually aligned to this school of thought. And it's actually being championed by the National Council on Administration of Justice Criminal Justice Committee, led by Honorable Lady Justice Grace Ngenya of the Court of Appeal. One of the terms of reference of this committee is actually to address the issue around petty offenses. So either to champion law, to champion policy, or to ensure that there's sensitization and awareness creation around the existence of petty offenses. So there's a committee set up by the NCAJ that has all the relevant stakeholders there. So you have the prisons, the ODPP, you have various civil society that sit in that committee, and you have allies really in that committee. But then also translating from now the committee itself, because a committee is a small frame of people, but looking at the entire justice system, I think there's an appreciation that the continued existence of petty offenses really strains the system. So we have seen repeated calls from the prisons to decongest prisons through any ways, diversion, alternative justice systems. Basically, please, we cannot handle any more people. And then the DPP creating the diversion policy, which is fantastic for petty offenders because it then gives the DPP the mandate to divert certain cases out of prosecution and out of the criminal justice system. The continued emphasis on bail and bond and other reasonable accommodations at the police station. That is also a fantastic tool that can be used there to ensure that people do not enter the criminal justice system by then getting a warning or a caution. I often keep reminding people that, by the way, when you're arrested for an offense, you don't necessarily actually have to go through the entire process when a police officer can actually caution or warn you. It is within their power. And they can use that power. So the guidelines that were developed by the NCAJ, called the Guidelines on the Law and Practice and Management of Petty Offenders, actually give a step-by-step way in which all the actors in the criminal justice system can address the issue of petty offenses, starting from arrest all the way to sentencing.
Let me hang on to arrest, because essentially, I don't know, I think we have bigger fish to fry as far as maintaining law and order aside from petty offenses, yet they are making up 70% of the people in our remand and prison systems. So how do we onboard police officers specifically? Yes, they do have, I think they know that they can choose to caution you, but then they still choose to arrest, which cascading into all those problems that we've talked about. So police officers, how do we get to them?
I think it's a question of training, first of all. The training that they do receive at the very onset. How do you inculcate human rights principles, human rights standards, progressive conversations around petty offenses into the training that they get? How then do you also, what are their KPIs? I've always had interesting discussion around this. Do they have quotas that they're supposed to meet? And are they actually actioning what they're doing because of a various quota or because of orders from above. And you see some of these conversations then streaming into how they do and implement the law.
Yeah.
Because there are certain police officers who would actually be okay with petty offenders just being cautioned and cited and then told, of course, if you're a repeat offender now, we will have to escalate issues because we've cautioned you and then you keep doing the same thing.
Yeah, there's
Now
literally a
let's have
sign that says "Usikojoe hapa" because of you.
Exactly.
It's time we take action.
But there are others who then say that indeed there has been a menace, there's a lot of complaint, and as such we have to, exert a bit of power on this. So it's a question of training, a question of orientation, a question of looking at how do we ensure that all of us are speaking from the same book and page. Because another frustration is that they often arrest a lot of people and then they're diverted by the prosecutor, thereby saying that the prosecution is not playing ball and frustrating their work.
Okay.
I think I get frustrated because, the NCAJ has worked and come up with this framework. They seem to have agreed. In the NCAJ, all these players are present. Starting from the police, going all the way to the prosecutor, to the prisons person. They are present. But they will do things on paper and they are not willing to actually follow through with them because it plays across all of them. Police will not really look at petty offenses as petty offenses. They will want to take advantage of the fact that they have petty offenses for maybe the likelihood of meeting these quotas and their performance. The ODPP may not necessarily want this thing to end because it also talks about them doing their job and going to court and prosecuting. And magistrates may not necessarily want to just look at somebody, this is a petty offense, I have liberty to give them the maximum custodial sentence or any other, But then they choose not to. Because why would the magistrate who is then seeing it has failed at that point of arrest, it has failed at the point of prosecution, here it is with me. And then you still give this person some bail and bond term of 10K, or you go in for 6 months and I could have sent this guy home. I could have just told this person, go on, cut grass. They don't do it. The prison system is not really complaining about people coming in. When you have an overcrowding in prisons, you have to feed these people.
Yeah.
And it's what that means.
Their version of capitation.
Yes. Oh, wow. We're at time. I was going to ask, pretty much like we have a few seconds before it's time. Now, I think I was just going to ask what's next in this case. Like, how far are you and what's remaining to be done to push for the change?
There is a bill within Parliament actually calling for a few of the laws to be decriminalized. It actually is at a significant stage. It's with the Justice and Legal Affairs Committee. It should have been tabled. We're waiting for it to be tabled. Hopefully it will be tabled. So there's that. There's a clamor to push for this law to be tabled. This legislation to be tabled. So that is one good win that I'm hoping that will come out of Parliament. But again, as I said, there's a lot of sensitization that needs to take place.
Right.
Because whereas the law is also decriminalized, we also need to tell people that the laws are decriminalized and as such they cannot be arrested for certain laws that have been removed from law. But then there's also a reorientation that needs to happen within the criminal justice system, as Eric has rightly said, that people in various places of power and duty bearers know various ways in which they can actually ensure that they protect the vulnerability of this person within the criminal justice system. Just to mention, there is a sentencing policy guideline that was developed in 2023 that actually speaks to how petty offenders need to be sentenced. And one of the things that is going to be very interesting is looking at how various magistrates deal with petty offenders. We're not saying that certain petty offenders cannot go into incarceration. There are sometimes overarching reasons. Habitual offender, has morphed into a situation that is now gravitating outside of the petty offense realm. So there are concerns there. And as such, I think we also need to be mindful that sometimes there are other circumstances that lead to certain people. So that is what I look forward to.
Right. More advocacy is needed. Hopefully we'll have you back. Thank you so much. Julie Wayua Matheka, human rights advocate, talking about why we should decriminalize petty offenses. It's coming up to 10 a.m. We'll tell you now what to expect on Your World, which is starting in just a few moments. 10 to 11 a.m., Love and Art, the art of telling a love story. Valentine's is coming. For some people, they're hearing winter is coming. They hear Valentine's and like, oh my God.
I just hear the song, Valentine's is coming.
And then 11 to 12 is Safeguarding Forests, Securing Kenya's Future. That's on NTV. Nation FM will have Claudia Naisabo and Brian Aseli. From me, Janet Wogwa, Mariam Bishar, Eric Latif, thank you for staying with Fixing the Nation. See you, Kesho.